Good morning, Year 7. Welcome back to some poetry. Before we get on to today's poem, I want you to write down 10 things either, either about what your mum means to you or what she does for you. So just 5 minutes to do that. Today, the learning objective is to read and analyse the poem Catrin. So your title is just Catrin. And before we begin, it's always worth going over, making sure you've got everything on your table around you. So what you need is a pen, an exercise book, or some paper. If you've come to the end of your book, or you're coming to the end of your book, let me know, and I will get one delivered to you. Coloured pens and pencils, a copy of the poem, which I will attach to Classcharts, and there's a help sheet if you need it, which is attached to Classcharts as well. And obviously, as we're going through the lesson, you can stop this at any point to catch up. You don't have to go at the pace that I'm delivering this at. Obviously, I have found that some people are sort of racing through, trying to do it at the speed of that my commentary goes at when I go on to the next slide, which is, I probably should have pointed this out, isn't a thing. You should stop it after each slide if you need to keep up. Here's some things you might have written down for what your mum does for you. She cares, she listens, she helps, she supports, she loves you, she drives you around, she helps with work, and she gives you money. Now read the poem, and as you read, try to visualise the images Clarke creates as you read it. Use the glossary below to help you. Write the definitions on your poem. There's 4 words that you might not be completely familiar with there. So just read the poem, and you don't need to write anything down apart from possibly these words if you don't know what they mean. If you do, then don't worry about it. But just read the poem and try and visualise the images that Clarke creates. And here now, perhaps as I read it as well, you can see if you can visualise the images that the poet Gillian Clarke is well, I won't say trying, successfully creating. So here we are, Catrin. I can remember you, child, as I stood in a hot white room at the window watching the people in the cars taking turn at the traffic lights. I can remember you, our first fierce confrontation, the tight red rope of love which we both fought over. It was a square environmental blank, disinfected of paintings or toys. I wrote all over the walls with my words, coloured the clean squares with the wild tender circles of our struggles to become separate. We want, we shouted, to be two, to be ourselves. Neither won nor lost the struggle in the glass tank clouded with feelings which changed us both. Still I am fighting you off, as you stand there with your straight, strong, long brown hair and your rosy, defiant glare, bringing up from the heart's pool that old rope, tightening about my life, trailing love and conflict, as you ask, may you skate in the dark for 1 more hour. I want you to spend 10 minutes now writing out the statements on the left and matching them to the evidence on the right. And then there is a solution that I'll be giving you to this. And there it is. Connected them all up there, the statements with the evidence. That's just an exercise in finding supporting statements for points. Now I want you to think about it now. We've read it a couple of times, and I want you in no more than 4 lines to write down what you think this poem is about. What's its theme? We've discussed what theme is before. Like a theme is nearly always or always a sort of an abstract noun, like love or hate or terror. Those are themes. And works of art like writing and so on express themes. So Romeo and Juliet says things about love that other, it says that all-consuming love can be dangerous and so on. So what's the theme of this poem, and what that's what you want to be thinking about. What's this poem about? Is it about longing? Is it about desire? Is it about reflection? What's it about? Write 4 lines. I'd like you to send that to me if you can as well. That's not the task I want sent, but if you want to, you can send that to me. But you could have had any of these. This poem is about the birth of her daughter, Catrin, and her relationship with her. In this poem, Gillian Clarke explores the emotions connected with being a mother. She wrote the poem to answer a question she once asked herself. Why did my beautiful baby daughter have to become a teenager? There you go, I've got one of those. In the poem, Gillian Clarke often refers to the struggle to become separate, to be born, the struggle to be an individual, the struggle to get greater freedom and independence. I mean, in some ways, we spend our whole lives trying to sort of separate ourselves in some way from our parents, don't we? And I think she's linked it, that red cord that she talks about there is the connection of the umbilical cord at birth. So add these to your answers if you've, add these to your answers. And here's some more of broadly what the poem is about. The poet is at home with her daughter Catrin. Catrin has been pleading with her mother to be allowed to stay out skating in the dark for one more hour. The poet remembers when Catrin was born. She remembers standing in her hospital room looking out the window at the traffic and the people outside. The poet says it was a struggle then, the struggle of the birth and the struggle of the new baby to come into the world and be independent. It is still a struggle, she says, as her growing daughter wants more and more freedom. Now here's another opportunity for us to work out how it is through language choices the poet has created a certain feel. So highlight, underline or shade over the personal pronouns in this poem. And personal pronouns are things such as I, we, our or you. Now when you've done that, I want you to, what do you notice about the way the personal pronouns are used during the poem? What effect have they created? Using all those personal pronouns, what effect has it created? That's 5 minutes there. And it's not rocket science, you know. Don't overthink this, because the use of pronouns, personal pronouns, emphasizes the personal aspect of the poem. It is as if she is talking directly to her daughter and we're sort of overhearing it, isn't it? It creates a very intimate tone. We've gone over this a few times in class, what imagery is. So what does the word imagery mean? I want you to write down this definition. I know we've discussed this at length, so you do know it, but there's no harm in writing it down again. Imagery is the name given to the elements in a poem that spark off the senses. So despite image being a synonym for picture, you can say, look at that image on the wall, as well as saying, look at that picture on the wall. Images aren't necessarily visual. Any of the 5 senses, sight, hearing, touch, taste and smell, can be used by the author to create an image or impact to which the reader responds. All we need to do for that slide is to understand it and to write down the definition of imagery. And I think, that definition of imagery is fine, actually. Right, now with the term imagery in mind, that's something that sparks off one of the senses. Create a table of words, as I've begun doing there, which stand out as either fighting or caring language. So you've got fighting down one side and caring down the other. There's 11 fighting words and 5 caring, loving words. That shouldn't take you more than 5 minutes. And by this time you should be very familiar with this, I think, rather good poem. And here we are. If you haven't managed it yourself, you can now copy these in. Fierce, shouted, confrontation, fought, struggle, fighting, defiant and tightening is all fighting language. And on the caring, loving language side, tender, love, feelings and heart. So Gillian Clarke would have chosen these words carefully to fit a purpose. Make no mistake, Year 8, that whenever you look at a poem, even if it's a bad one, that poet will have spent a long time, hours, deciding over every single word that's in it, every single piece of punctuation, every single piece of enjambment. Whether it's been successful or not is, obviously up for debate on a case-by-case basis. So and the poems that we show you are good, solid poems. So these words, and there's 11 of the fighting ones and 4 of the loving ones for a reason. Now I want you to choose one word from each column that creates an image in your mind. Explain why you think she decided to use these words to get across her point or feelings. Here's an example. Clarke chose the word confrontation to describe childbirth, which is an interesting word to describe childbirth, isn't it? I think she chose this word because in choosing this word she's trying to show. What could you be trying to show if you chose the word confrontation to describe childbirth? Or if you want, you can pick one of your own. And if I want 2, one from each list. The poem's divided into 2 stanzas. The stanzas are merely the verses, but we don't call them verses or paragraphs in poetry, we call them stanzas. What tense is the first stanza written in? Is it past, future, or present? I want you to make a decision, read it, make a decision, and highlight some evidence and annotate. What tense is the second stanza written in? Do the same there. And here's the answer. The poem's divided into 2 stanzas, obviously. The first stanza is written in the past tense and deals with Catrin's difficult birth. It is about memory, e.g., I remember you, child. The second stanza is written in the present tense and deals with an incident in which Catrin is asked to stay out skating. What do you think the decisions between the stanzas could represent? Why do you think the first stanza is written in the past tense and the second stanza is written in the present tense? As I say, don't overthink it. It's fairly obvious. And you can add to your answer here. The division between the stanzas could represent the years that have passed between the birth and Catrin's adolescence, the growing separation between mother and daughter, first at birth, then later as Catrin struggles to become more independent. Now, this is the piece of work I want you to upload onto Classcharts for me to have a look at, please, Year 8. You've been doing a brilliant job at that, so I've got loads of that to go through later today. I'm looking forward to it, in fact. How successful do you think Clarke has been in capturing the conflict between parents and children? Here we are. It's a pill paragraph again. Clarke has successfully captured the conflict between parents and children by... What technique? Is it a metaphor or a simile, or is it using the past tense or the present tense, or a controversial, choice of adjective? For example, she writes, quote, this successfully highlights the conflict because. So you've got some sentence starters there. So there's one, and here's one I've done for you. Obviously, I don't want to see this one written up and sent to me. I want to see your own. So Clarke has successfully captured the conflict between parents and children by writing the poem with 2 separate stanzas. For example, she writes to be 2, to be ourselves at the end of one stanza before starting a new stanza. This successfully highlights a conflict because it emphasises the growing separation between mother and daughter, first at birth and then later as Catrin struggles to become more independent. So there we are. You've got to answer that question at the top. How successful do you think Clarke has been in capturing the conflict between parents and children? I want to see your paragraph there. Upload it onto Classcharts. And Pope, do I see you? I see you. Oh, good. I see you again tomorrow. Fantastic. Enjoy, and I'll speak to you tomorrow.